According to Ymir, moons are celestial bodies. And while that can be interpreted astronomically as any natural object found outside Earth's atmosphere, such as a star, planet, moon, meteor, asteroid, or comet, the way he says it is as though he is referring to a god. I believe this is echoed in his staff, which is a copy of Meda's tail, intended to receive messages from the greater will. And while Meda's tail represents the microcosm of the greater will, symbolic of this god, Ymir's staff houses instead a strange-looking piece of meteorite. I believe this meteorite is representative of the Earth itself, given its shape is reminiscent of the gravitational map of the world, which is very in line with Meda and the greater will's association with gravity, but in the same breath perfectly represents the core of a celestial body, as asteroids are in essence the remains of protoplanets, thus comparing celestial bodies to what represents a god. We see this all throughout real-world mythologies, with gods being represented by particular planets or celestial bodies, and I believe we see another nod to this in the Eye of the Fell God, which bears a striking resemblance to the storm on Jupiter. And yet, Ymir's tone regarding celestial bodies is hardly one of reverence, but instead almost boredom, as if he knows what a celestial body or god truly is. No longer a slave to fear of the unknown and mysterious, more encapsulated with what he can do with the truths he is privy to, and the moon merely the closest of celestial bodies. Regardless of his personal opinion, these moons are important enough to be worshipped by the Carians and be used as a symbol of their authority and royalty. Renala of the full moon, Relana of the twin moons, and Rani of the dark moon, for example. We see basins for reflecting moonlight in their manors and castles, like a chamber built for a communion with or seeking guidance from the moon, and altars collecting starlight decorated with the phases of the moons. Their very helmet ornaments and crowns are depictions of these celestial bodies, and the Carian royalty are referred to as lunar vessels by their knights. So then, what actually is the role of these moons? What are these celestial bodies or lunar vessels, and what do they do? How many of them are there, and how do they relate to Carian royalty? We are, in fact, told the purpose of at least one of the known moons, the Black Moon of Noxtella, which was said to be the guide of many stars. But what does that mean, to guide the stars? The combination of the starlight and amber starlight shards, and the respective drafts they make, as well as a glintstone and amber glintstone, suggests that star refers to the construct consisting of life force, residual or ancient, captured within a vessel. This construct consists of a vessel, power, and a fate, much like the Empyrean Rani, who is a vessel containing her soul, which is capable of wielding a weapon that requires fate. Raya Lucaria and its headmasters appear to believe the primeval current is the commanding force of the stars, and the view of moons as equal to the stars appears to be viewed as an act of heresy. This is despite the Lazuli mages being recognized as singular among the greater of Raya Lucaria Academy. Not only is their presence seemingly more than tolerated, they are also dedicated to the mastery of the moon-worshipping Carian arts. The drawstring freezing grease reads, solidified grease, made using Rani's furtive arts. The women of the Carian royal family look to the moon to guide their fates. Rani's is a moon dark, and blanketed with rime. And as Ymir tells us himself, we ourselves are in essence made of the very stars. For the Carians, that would make the moon's divine guides to the stars, both royal and common, much like the holding of the stars paused Rani's fate. To view the moons as equal to such a force is to view them on equal terms as the forces that determine the fates of the stars. In other words, the gravity-controlling powers of the greater will, who uses gravity-wielding malformed stars and whose gravity-invoking daughter landed on a meteorite. These are the very gravity powers that the Carian prince Radahn mastered to challenge this order, and this heretical belief of the Carians of the moon's equality in importance and capacity to the stars and their fate is exactly what we see in the Eternal Cities, whose black moon is said to have been the guide to countless stars. However, it isn't seen as heresy in the case of the Eternal Cities, at least initially. And I believe that is because, unlike directing the affairs of Carian royalty as we see in the Carian context with moons, In their role as guides to stars within the Eternal City's context and era, they were merely guiding the stars as a part of their role to maintain the health of the root network. But before we explore that, how does all of this relate to this black moon and it being a guide to stars? Well, just like with the Carrions and their lunar vessels guiding the many stars of the Carrion forces, I would say the same goes for these throned figures and their stars. Just as we saw water with the moon worshipping Carrions, the Eternal Cities are covered in water and seemingly dedicated in major part to the management of the flow of that water. The Tibia Mariner guide those who have died in battle to Helven's steeple, and they guide these souls by way of the water. The gloam waters of ethereal death they glide on, inhabiting nearby corpses. We see this represented on their boats in the form of stars, strewn throughout this water pattern, and the giants that they summon, which protects them, don a gloam-eyed ring on their wedding finger, married to their duty, the guidance of souls. Much like these throned giant maidens, even their attire is comparable to the enthroned maidens, and their boats have motifs of plants within twin crescent moons, very similar to motifs from the Eternal Cities, and rebirth monuments that allow us to summon spirit ashes. I believe the water is teeming with souls, as guided by the Tibia Mariner, and water is directly controlled by the influence of the moon, as well as the structure of the Eternal Cities. I think this is shown in the corresponding patterns, the Tibia Mariner guiding the stars along the water, and the moons of the Eternal Cities pulling that water through the system into their respective water processing cities, each hanging above their own city like the Black Moon once did for Noxtella, acting much like the suppressing pillar, causing death to drift towards them in the way of soul-infused water. This is how water was transported throughout the root networks, how nutrients were delivered, and how waste was cycled out and removed from the system. After all, we see runes, which are in essence cycled and processed souls, in the form of liquid, in the bounty of the Erd Tree, the soul juice that Godfrey stoically accepted, ultimately causing the revocation of his title as first Natty Elden Lord. I think this is also likely the reason we see not only the Elden Beast in an aquatic location, but also Meta and even Renala, as water would seem to be a medium by which souls can be contained in and transported through, like the vapor of the ancestral spirit beast's and ancestral infant's head, or the water coffins that are said to transport the soul after death. And we see the concepts of the souls ferried through water ending up in the tree roots in the form of the stone coffin ships, given that the pillars on the ships are found throughout the lands between in old religious sites and catacombs, ancient sites of tree burial. All in all, the souls within water would literally make the moons the guides of the stars and, as such, commanders of their fate, or more specifically, the ebbs and flow of souls. And this changed from a sacred and necessary duty as we see in the Eternal Cities and the role of water in the health of a root system, to a heretical belief in the Carrions and Lazuli of the equivalence of the moon's influence over stars below, to that of the greater will over the stars above. And this, in my opinion, was entirely intentional, on the part of the moons, who influence the lands between directly, through guidance of their lunar vessels. And I believe the term lunar vessel is used on purpose to invoke the same idea as when we are told Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring, carrier of its vision. So what are they? What does it take to make a moon? If we go by the definition of celestial body to mean divine vessel, then we need only to look at other examples in the game to get an idea of what we are working with when we are talking about a divine vessel. For example, fire giants, which act as temporary vessels for the Fell God, and they operate by way of sacrifice to invoke the power of their god to a limited degree. Radagon, who is a divine vessel for the Elden Ring, whose body I imagine was in part made divine by the sacrifice of many. Melania, who is an inhabitable vessel to the god of Rot, and whose blooming results in the sacrifice of her own vessel. Or Rykard, whose divine flesh has merged with that of the world-devouring serpent in conjunction with mass sacrifice, in order to create a divine vessel capable of containing the power necessary to devour the very gods. What's more, we see in certain instances these divine vessels being used as tools to conduct power, or for a specific purpose, like the body of Radagon being used to contain the Elden Ring and then turned into a weapon to conduct and channel divine power, or the body of Hailstor, which is a liminal vessel for the Night Lord's rune, like Radagon's body is for the Elden Ring, or the suspiciously familiar-looking black knives which also share this liminal space, where a god-slaying power is being held. The Greater Will is described by the Hat of Ymir as being a lightless void, and, as we explored already, we see the weapons of this entity take form in the gravity-wielding, malformed stars thrown to the lands between to deal punishment, just like its gravity-manipulating, black hole-wielding daughter. This extends even to the Black Flame, whose sigil bears a striking resemblance to Meda's own face, and is a void-like flame, described as a weighty flame that saps HP, much like the weight of a black hole saps light. In regard to the moons, I believe the mechanism of their control of gravity to ferry souls and waste through the waters to maintain the health of the root system was controlled by both the mass of the moons themselves, hence their impact on gravity, and the consciousnesses that operated them. In terms of composition, there is ultimately only one assured method of creating a celestial body, or rather, a divine vessel, and that is mass sacrifice. The grafting of souls, if you will, and that is what I believe these moons are. In essence, they are the equivalent of a graven mass, but one with a leading alpha or central consciousness. This is exactly as we see Selen attempt, when she becomes a graven mass, struggling to vie for control as the alpha in a rancorous mass of souls. Perhaps this is the fate of one who does not possess a divine vessel upon attempting to ascend as a celestial body. Her vessel's composition could not contain and/or could not conduct the mass of souls, and so instead of becoming a moon, beacon to the stars and shaper of their fate, she lost herself in an ocean of stars of her own making. I would wager that it's these mass sacrifices that we see in the Eternal Cities, very akin to the other mass sacrifice examples I mentioned earlier involving divine ascension, that comprise the many souls of the Graven Moons. And just as Renala demonstrates, the transformation of souls into stone is an art known well to the Carrion royalty, the lunar vessels. As seemingly an object of worship in the Eternal Cities, perhaps made to represent the moons, these metal balls perhaps demonstrate this concept, given that it would seem the origin of the many silver tears appears to be these giant sentient moon-like balls that contain a larval tear. So if each moon has a corresponding Carrion Royal as a lunar vessel, which follows them wherever they may go, that would suggest we have 3 moons. However, in terms of spells, it could be read that we have 4, the full moon, twin moons, and Rani's dark moon. But is the dark moon the black moon, meaning 5 moons? How many lunar celestial bodies are there, really? In Rani's ending, we come face to face with what I believe is the dark moon, the lost black moon of the Eternal Cities, which marks the ushering in of the Age of Stars. We are met with the final princess of the lunar lineage, and we see the era ruled by her lunar vessel begin. And speaking of lunar vessel, in these very moments we are in fact being watched. If we zoom out of this scene and look to the opposite side that the camera is facing, we can see a collection of 3 moons watching over Rani's victory and ascension. One full moon bathed in light like Renala's, a dark moon like Rani's, and a small golden moon. Frankly, I think it's outrageous that Rani has a moon, and my favourite Empyrean doesn't. So, just as there's Rani's dark moon, I shall dub this golden moon Miquella's unalloyed moon, or Mum for short, in dedication to the Golden Empyrean and his age of compassion. But I have more reasons than just because it's gold, and Rani has one, not fair, to name this after Miquella and his unalloyed age of compassion. Considering he not only tried to invoke an eclipse, but his own eyes also appear to reflect eclipses. And the most compelling evidence to me is that this moon may very well have been an asset intended for Miquella's ending. Not the 3rd moon, but a 4th moon. Many don't know, but there is a lot of evidence of either an undiscovered, currently unused, or cut ending for Miquella's Age of Compassion, as we get a speech near identical to that of Rani's endgame speech. Here, have a listen to this comparison.
I do solemnly swear.
I hereby swear
To every living being and every living soul.
To every living being and every living soul.
Now cometh the age of the stars.
Now comes the age of our Eden.
1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon.
1,000-year voyage, guided by compassion.
Here beginneth the chill night that encompasses all, reaching the great beyond.
Beginning here, love encompasses all.
Into fear, doubt, and loneliness. As the path stretcheth into darkness.
No living thing will be denied. No deed censured. I am ready to embrace the whole of it.
Let us go together, my dear consort eternal.
Let us go together. Radahn, my promised consort.
Perhaps this golden moon may be a remnant of this ending left behind after development, after all. Both Ranni's dark moon and Miquella's unalloyed moon are part of the same asset. Or maybe a plan for future implementations. Regardless, I am happy to accept this adorable little moon as an unused asset and fourth moon given how difficult it is to actually see. And while I do enjoy ruminating on this and its potential, my interpretation of the 3 moons of Elden Ring doesn't start, live, or die with this asset mattering or even existing or not, as I believe we already have very solid evidence of 3 moons already, the twin moons and the dark moon. Just like the rings of the 3 enthroned eternal city maidens, I believe the 3 moons are comprised of the twin moons and a third moon, the dark moon. The very one Ranni was taught to fear by the snowy crone. And I think this is in essence exactly what we see at the Moonlight Altar, the twin moons and the secret third moon, the towering, veiled and shrouded little sister, the one we finally see at the end of the game, this one, this huge, horrifying space tumor right here. Here it is compared to the onlookers from earlier. The twin moons are these two, and I believe this as they are not only exactly the same size, but they are also identical in their composition. The one difference between them is that one is darker than the other. But I don't believe that is because this moon is the dark moon. I believe this moon is the twin moon of Renala's full moon, Rilana's twin moon, and the reason it is unseeable from the lands between, which is bathed in the Erdtree's blinding light, is because it is the lunar vessel of Rilana who is in the Shadowlands, the lands in the shadow of the Erdtree. Exactly where this darker, or rather shrouded or veiled moon literally is. And right as we would expect if this were true, this shrouded moon shows up in the Shadowlands, far more clear and vibrant, where its chosen vessel is. So this is Renala's moon, this is Rilana's moon, and Ranni's dark moon is here, obscured by the Erdtree, also shrouded but entirely concealed. Just like the towering younger sister shrouded in Noklatio. And just like how these twin moons and this dark third moon's position matches the rings of these enthroned moon maidens, so too does the nature of their grandeur align with the blessing of Noklatio, to rise from near death unaided, returning more powerful than before. Much like the sister in Nokron being on a normal-sized throne, the second sister of Nokstella being on an elevated chair, and the shrouded third towering sister of Noklatio, tallest of them all. So what's different about this third towering sister? This dark moon? Well, in my opinion, it looks an awful lot like a black hole. Like a singular, gigantic, liminal vessel akin to those used to contain great power. Like the eyes of the Fell God representing its power. Like whirling energy around black holes. Or like the god vessels of Radagon and Hailstor containing their respective rune configurations. And just like them, the dark moon would be the vessel that would contain the Elden Ring, placing it beyond touch, or meddling, as we see in Ranni's ending. So finally, why 3? Have you ever wondered why Meta was unable to communicate with the Greater Will? Yes, it very well may have something to do currently with her position in the Shadowlands, though this may be self-imposed isolation as we do see her flee after we defeat her. However, I think a better indication is the state of the orb between her tail, which is said to be where she receives signals from the Greater Will. However, if you have a good look at this microcosm, unlike the one used in the spell, you'll notice it appears as though this microcosm is in fact a sun being eclipsed by 3 moons, each larger than the one before it. I believe this is the reason she is unable to receive a signal. It's somewhat jammed, and we see this symbolism again in the Great Star's Mace, presenting 3 progressively larger moons blocking out the sun, and most importantly, to bring it entirely full circle, in both Raya Lucaria by the Carrion Queen and upon the fate manipulating ambrosia of the Eternal Cities. The very elixir we use in the church, linking this heretical family of moon worshippers to both the Eternal Cities and the foundations that would lead to Rani's birth. Just like these throned maidens, who progressively are on higher thrones until the tallest located in the shrouded city of Nocladio, it's the towering third sister shrouded and veiled like the dark moon in the Erd Tree that would be the foundations of the future, and the new vessel of the Elden Ring, passing on the power and, importantly, the experience or memories of the ones before it, given the very shards of the Black Moon are used to expand memory capacity. So why the third sister? What is so important about the third? I think similarly to how the Aeonia flower blooms 3 times in order to achieve godhood, the blessing which came about in the shrouded Eternal City may have a similar cumulative effect, coming back stronger than before. So then, what were these 3 enthroned maidens? These 3 sisters whose combined eclipse blinded a god, blocking its communication with its own daughter. If moons which are celestial bodies are, as I theorize, divine vessels, that are capable of holding power within them like a proper and true graven mass, then we know only of a very few number of rare beings selected by envoys of God to become a divine vessel, and those few rare beings would be the Empyreans. So who were these supposed enthroned Empyreans? And how did the third towering sister go from a guide to many stars to master of all of them? Well, for that answer, we have to understand the very roots mired in madness. We need to understand the lineage of the Golden Bough, the nature of godhood and importance of the capacity and composition of vessels, and the intricacies of the multi-generational plan to fool a god. Most important of all, we need to understand how all of this relates to this snake that wears a twin crown, like the Nox, adorned with obsidian gems. After all, the events and foundations of this church would lead to the very birth of Rani, bringer of the Nox Age of Stars, and her very story is etched into its very grounds. I think that this landmass looks suspiciously like a larval tear, with the umbilical-like cords leading to Raya Lucaria, where she was raised and where her mother ruled. The depths of the Eternal Cities linked so heavily to the Carrions, whose secrets she pursued and was guided through to the Moonlight Altar to meet the Dark Moon by her own mother, the frenzied village representing the madness that would allow her to go through with her insane machinations, such as siding with Rykard and tying up some loose ends that make even her most ardent supporters think twice. But importantly and relevant to this specifically, divesting your flesh in a double death ritual wherein you sacrifice a relative, both of which are destinations of these roads. Even her shaman lineage is hinted at in the settlement beneath her tower. Her whole story as we know it, all in one location. And just in case that wasn't enough and you're still trying to let the turtle, or dog, off the hook, I'll inform you that the only rise on the secret Moonlight Altar where Rani met this mysterious Dark Moon, which contains the very spell that invokes the power of the Dark Moon, is called Chelona's Rise, which in Latin would translate to Turtle Rise, almost as on the nose as the roots upon the back of the turtle snake talisman. This is the short form version of a 2.5 hour long video I have been trying to upload and been running into many issues with, but it's also here to entice those of you that wouldn't normally invest the time into a longer video. So I suppose consider it a teaser for the much larger video on its way. The long form will be covering the entire lineage of these 3 sisters, and I intend to drop it as soon as possible. If this topic interests you, join me next week for the long form. There's way more to the picture, and I am certain if you liked this, you will love what comes next. I hope you enjoyed the video. To those of you who've been waiting, I'm sorry for the long wait. Thank you for your patience. I'll see you next video. But in the event my computer takes a while to get repaired, check out Miquella's Alt Account and Not Godwin, who expand and diversify on some of these concepts in unique ways, like the soul of a sorcerer being a key ingredient of the spell they create, or how vessels can be explored and explained through crabs. Thank you to Banoon for the amazing shots of the Dark Moon and the Triple Moons. You can see her channel here. The thumbnails she's made for me are as quality as her amazing videos. And thank you to my patrons and YouTube members.